Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, it's another year, another time to make some more money, and I've got the course for you. Start the Conversation, Get the Meeting will help your team, both business development, sales development, get into those new cold accounts, whether that function is under marketing or sales. I'll help you with that by starting organic, natural conversations, not pitching. Have people open up with you, build up a connection with them, understand your total addressable market, prioritize it, and put in a system that scales, that's predictable, that works the way you want it to work instead of the old school pitch. Believe me, I've sat through so many of these cold calling seminars, courses, books, and I've been doing it for 30 years, and it's evolved. And what I'm doing today is what's working in today's world. It works naturally, and people are just loving it, getting meetings, closing deals, and doing it without the rejection that is typically there in sales. So check it out at b2brevenue.com under the training tab. You can schedule a call with me. We can talk it over. I'll explain how it works and how we can work together on it. You can buy it per student, or I'll customize it for your particular product and team and coach you through that process. Also, if you're a sales leader and you want predictability, you want direction, momentum, and control with your deals, you can sign up for that course as well. Same type of model. A year-long access to it. It's content, community, and coaching, all included at b2brevenue.com. You can get my free ebook there on how companies make product selections. That's all free. Let's get into the interview, but I want to make sure you're checking out my partners. They're in the show notes. This week, it's Pipedrive and CoVideo. Pipedrive is the new CRM. It's been out for 5 years. I've been using it forever. I love that. It's connected up with your email, your calendar, and now they have team capabilities. CoVideo is the video email system. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's the way to break into new accounts. It's so much more engaging than text. Check them out. Also, make sure you're checking me out on LinkedIn, Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end. Hey, Carmen, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Brian, thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a co-founder of Kula Partners. We're an agency focused on helping manufacturers improve their digital marketing performance and understand more about the customers that they serve and deliver a digital experience too. So that's, I guess, an even faster elevator pitch than normal, Brian.
Hey, cool. And how'd you get interested in this?
Oh, that's a long and winding road.
That might not be as easy to answer.
Yeah. I think what we found, we've been as an agency, we've been around for well over a decade. In that time, we just increasingly found that we were delivering significant impact to our manufacturing clients, and we just over time really narrowed our focus as an agency to work with that niche of manufacturing firms operating in a B2B space, often with a complex sale.
Yeah. And are you calling on the owner or the CMO or both, or?
Ourselves as an agency, we would typically work with the organization we work with are of a size where you're typically working with a marketing organization versus the CEO per se, but that's not always the case.
And what's their impetus to work with you? Why would they not do it in-house? Why would they pick you guys over someone else?
Well, I think many manufacturers find themselves in a place where I think if you ask them, quietly, they'd say that they feel very much behind the eight ball. I think a lot of B2B people feel that way as they look at their maybe look across the table at their B2C counterparts. But manufacturers specifically, I think, feel quite a bit behind the eight ball in that their digital transformation, insofar as it's happened, has been mostly focused, of course, on how they produce, how they make what they make, and that hasn't necessarily they don't typically have the talent in house and the expertise in house to really navigate the digital transformation of the marketing and sales apparatus. So they look to firms like us to help them do that.
And what's that journey look like from your perspective?
Well, that is a very different thing for every manufacturer. Yeah. So I would say that some of the commonalities would be finding ways to have an ongoing understanding of your customer's experience, a digital voice of customer, if you will. But I think that that transformation is really often one where these clients are starting from a point of view of a very rudimentary web presence that is not in any way interconnected with their CRM or their ERP, or marketing automation isn't even considered, et cetera. So, very often that's what we're helping people do, is bring all this together and really change the way they sell. And what I really try to encourage our clients is to say, we want you to care as much about how you market and sell what you make as you care about how you make what you make. Because manufacturers every one of them will give you a 5-hour factory tour. They certainly, they care passionately about what they make, and it's not to make fun of it even. I mean, of course, it's they ought to be proud. It's an incredible thing. Every time I go through a factory, I'm just blown away. It never gets old for me. But at the same time, they put a bit of an artificial ceiling on the value that they can create when they don't take that same passion and apply it to how those products are brought to market.
Yeah. And what do you find? Do they have a clear way of differentiating themselves from their competitors or alternatives?
Well, I think that is that's a really interesting question, Brian, because I think it gets to the crux of it that extends well beyond any kind of discussion of digital transformation or what have you. But you certainly see it come to life, if you will, in their digital presence. If you pull up the website of let's just say, if you were to pull up the websites of 50 North American manufacturing enterprises, mid-market B2B manufacturers. Excuse me. My estimation would be that somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of them on the homepage would communicate that the reason people ought to buy from them is a combination of superior quality, excellent or exceptional customer service, and they're outstanding people. Yeah. Quality service people. I've named it the QSP trap, and it's not to say that they don't make good quality products, and it's not to say they don't deliver great service, and it's also not to say they don't have good people. It's just to say that is in no way a position, and it's in no way a differentiation. I always fond of saying that when you have a position when somebody can be credibly the opposite. And nobody is going to market saying they have the worst quality, worst service provided by the most terrible people. So that should be your indication that right there, we don't actually have a position.
Yeah. And how do you get them away from that to something that would work?
Well, I first off, that can be a harsh pill, I think, for people to swallow. But I think it is, when they lift the mirror up and they really do look at it, it can be hard for people to deny that is indeed the true state of affairs. That they're, when somebody points out that you're in that QSP trap, you kind of look around and it's obvious. But then how do you get out of it? And I find it's really that pathway begins really with how you think about and message your brand, if you will. So I think that we have a lot of The world of marketing has a long history of expensive rebranding exercises and things of that sort. And I don't want to think about it through that lens. It's not about changing a logo here. It's about changing how the parts of the brand that we choose to highlight. And most of that in this day and age, digitally, actually still comes through with words, right? The H1 on the homepage is one of the key ways that your brand message actually comes to life. So we find that's a real starting point. Is helping people understand how can we get to a level of consistency in that messaging that can be reliably reproduced by a diverse number of people that impact how our brand is messaged, and done in a way that resonates and differentiates with the marketplace. Now, I found that the notion of brand archetypes is about the best model to think of here. Now, the notion of archetypes is not something that would be new to listeners. The notion that there are these characters, if you will, these archetypes that transcend cultures, transcend language. When I talk to you about a rebel, a rebel in North America, a brand or a person, if you will, that is considered a rebel, has the similar characteristics in North America that they would have in Europe, that they would have in Asia, etc. As a brand, if it has been shown that brands that consistently express themselves through the lens of one consistent archetype typically outperform the market in terms of value. So it's not a direct. This is the kind of thing where we're as far removed from tactical as you can get here. I mean, in some ways, people have to get with religion a little bit and look at the research around brand archetypes to understand the power behind them. But the one thing that I think they really help people do is, two things. They help you tap into a hidden pattern in the minds of B2B buyers. If you consistently express yourself through the voice of this archetype, then you begin to be differentiated in the minds of your buyers. And that same ability for archetypes to allow people to fill in the blanks or connect the dots, if you will, also helps your team. So, for instance, Pepsi, if we think of a consumer brand, is often considered that its archetype would be more of a jester. Pepsi is more likely to poke fun at Coke than Coke is to poke fun at Pepsi. Coke is more of an innocent brand. Because of that, if I were to take Brian, my guess is you haven't worked with Pepsi. You've never been the social media manager for Pepsi. But if I put you in the chair and said today you're the social media manager for Pepsi and you're going to interact on their Twitter account, and the only guiding philosophy that you need to have here is what would the Pepsi jester do?
Yeah. In
this moment.
Okay.
Well, I don't have to have 3 pages of guidelines now for you to know how to act, right? And you can fill in some blanks and probably pretty reliably communicate that brand that is Pepsi. Well, that same power that's been well researched and implemented across consumer marketing for the better part of a few decades. But B2B marketers just have never quite gotten to that level of sophistication, typically, in their go-to-market approach. And I think that there's some real power in doing so.
Is that because they take more of a checklist approach versus a strategic approach?
It's a bit of a cause and effect, maybe. I think it's just because of what they value. Yeah, I mean, I think consumer brands have, for a longer time, realized that where the value lies isn't in how it's made, but in how it's sold.
Yeah.
But man, like, you wouldn't say that about, to a person making semiconductors, as an example.
Right. Yeah.
I try to tell them it's about how it's sold and not about how it's made, and you're going to have a really tough conversation ahead.
And do you run into resistance about this, where people say, wow, we just want a better website, or we want a more modern website, or we just need to refresh our image?
Well, a good friend of mine, an old agency, a guy from way back, he's been in the agency business now, I think, over 50 years. One of his early bits of advice to me was, you can't counsel into no demand. So there's just no demand for the advice. You can't do that. So that's fair. I mean, I'm not saying everybody's up for completely reimagining their differentiation and positioning in the marketplace when they contract a firm such as ours. But for those that are up for it, I think those are the ones that will see the most benefit.
Yeah. And why did you decide to stick with manufacturing?
I think there's just look. It's a funny question, because I can answer that through a practical business lens, and then I can kind of answer it through a more kind of gut and kind of heart side of it. It's kind of like the frosted mini wheat or something. I can have the practical wheat side of the frosted side and answer it. But practically speaking, it's a space that we perform very well in. It was in our previous life as a more diversified agency. It was a category that we drove a lot of success in, and we began to see a lot of the same patterns emerge within that client base. And beyond that, it's certainly a vertical that has a lot of digital transformation of their marketing and sales apparatus ahead of them. Yeah. Again, they're a bit behind the eight ball, generally speaking, as a sector, or as a vertical, as broad as the vertical as it is. On the more heart or frosted side of that mini wheat is I just find it fascinating. I have this endless. I can't tell you. I have one client of ours. They manufacture sensors, and some of the sensors that they manufacture, their only purpose is to sense whether or not their other sensors are working properly, which, in addition to not even knowing about this level of sensor manufacture before getting them as a client, I just find that completely fascinating. There's just no end to the learning that you have in this business. I find in some ways everybody likes to talk about how the sexiness is out in the consumer marketing space, but I think the real interesting stuff is on the B2B side. I think the consumer stuff almost is a little boring to me by comparison.
Well, I think the consumer side is so, I don't know if academic's the right word, or just trendy, or, individual taste. Where the B2B side is like, it's much more analytical, and you have a tangible sense of how effective you are. Where on the consumer side, you got a lot of variables. Yeah. It's I think that we should probably just tee up an entirely new conversation around to compare those
B2B versus B2C. I mean, people talk about that a lot through the lens of online buying experiences and things of that nature. And I think that I think that sometimes very much misses the point. But I do agree with you as a marketer. It seems like, maybe I'll get myself into trouble with B2C marketers here, but I don't know. I mean, is B2C more about kind of just more understanding the culture and the extent to which that drives media strategy and whatnot is a lot more of a B2C consideration than it is a B2B one. But I may take that back. Yeah. I'll reserve the right to disagree with myself later on that, Brian.
And what's the right scope for you with your clients as far as what you guys do best versus what you would recommend and refer or outsource to other people?
Well,
Or you do everything. I don't know.
yeah, no, I just, sure. I guess our focus again is on the digital transformation of the marketing and sales apparatus. That often has the web presence or the website and network web properties as that digital foundation is certainly a core part of what we do. And helping both imagine what that is and then technically actually bring it together. We've already discussed the kind of the brand positioning and archetype kind of side of that offering, and then we also help folks on that transition from marketing to sales and how to make more of that marketing activity focused around target accounts, et cetera. So a lot of ABM work, et cetera. But I think that without at the risk of going into too much of an infomercial, that would pretty much give your listeners an idea of it.
But do you focus on like content or advertising or both, or what works in that particular segment?
Both. I find that content and advertising very much go hand in hand, but we don't find ourselves doing a whole lot in the realm of, we certainly don't bother with TV ads and things of that sort. That's kind of not where we play. But we certainly do lots of PPC work and things of that sort, and promotion of content and social, et cetera.
And where do you see B2B marketing going? I mean, do you see the next transformation happening, or do you think it's pretty much steady state? Or
well, it's not steady state because, of course, things are always changing. But there's lots of different. I guess if the where it's going isn't so much a highway as a spider web of off-ramps and whatnot. But one thing that we know for sure is that every indication points to B2B buying continuing to be more of a team sport in some ways. So the B2B buying committee is getting larger and larger. As it gets larger, its propensity to buy nothing goes up. This presents a lot of challenges to marketers, B2B marketers, as well to salespeople who are, sales organizations that used to, it was a matter of getting the decision maker on the line and working that relationship, and now it's about how do you navigate a buying committee structure that where the power dynamics may not be immediately obvious, and that translates over to marketers. I mean, we're only a short way into marketers really beginning to think about the content and the digital experiences that they create through the lens of buyer personas. Yeah. And okay, great. Well, now let's talk about buyer personas in this expanding B2B buying committee, because if we're talking about there being on average 6.8, so let's just round up to 7 for the interest of discussion, 7 people on the B2B buying committee. Well, if you have 7 personas, and that's assuming that you only have one line of business and one type of buying committee that you may be speaking to. And then you think your job as a digital marketer, as a marketer, is to create an experience, online, offline, et cetera, for each of those 7 personas. And you need to think about that buying journey from the point of view of top of funnel attraction and conversion down through middle of funnel validation and bottom of funnel sales, outreach, et cetera. I can tell you that as a marketer, you just wrote a content check that you're not willing to cash.
Yeah.
And I think that's a war of complexity that is only going to accelerate in the next while. And I think marketers and sales organizations really need to figure out how they're going to deal with it.
And the last question, how often do you get engaged with the sales side?
Incredibly often, actually. Maybe it's because we nose our way in there, but I find actually an awful lot of manufacturing organizations in our category, often the marketing and sales responsibility is, you're dealing with a VP of marketing and sales, so it's a shared role. So it's a natural kind of on-ramp into that. And of course, the minute marketing became responsible for lead generation, that was the moment that marketing got both more difficult and had its a natural kind of it opened the door for a proper sales conversation, I think, or a proper conversation with sales.
Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your conversation today. Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about your agency?
Well, Brian, I invite your listeners to find us at KulaPartners.com. That's KULA Partners.com. And I'm also the co-host of the Kula Ring Manufacturing Marketing Podcast, and I would love to have you all come over and take a listen.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. Hey, make sure you check us out on LinkedIn. And B2B Revenue is the website. You get the free ebook there. You can learn about the courses. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Brian Burns Sales Podcast on YouTube, where I store both these podcasts, my videos that I do daily on sales and marketing tips, all the webinars are hosted there. So if you ever get lost and you don't know where to go, Brian Burns Sales Podcast on YouTube is a great place to be. And you can sign up to get on my calendar at B2B Revenue under training, and we can talk over your sales and marketing situations about getting you into your dream accounts in a fast, natural, organic way. And if you happen to see my content fly by on LinkedIn, I'd really appreciate a like or comment or a share, and we'll see you next time.